be. So first, I would like to highlight certain, as the list is a bit long, so it took me a time to shorten it out. So I just want to highlight some important things. Sir has served in many eminent positions such as a Dean, Faculty of Rural Social Science, a syndicate and a Senate member in Gandhigram Rural Institute. He has completed his doctorate in 1994 from Bhagalpur University and PG from MKU, added on to this various certificate and diploma courses. Sir's main area of specialization is Gandhian thought. Various academic program and courses has been designed and formulated, like a course on culture and conflict, an online course on Gandhi and children. In the contribution of research, 8 PhD students and 4 MPhil awarded and 2 PhD still ongoing. The credentials are added like 21 papers published, 40 papers presented in seminars and conferences, participation in various seminars, workshops, and conferences on national and international platform. The criteria goes that Sir has even placed a separate position in international conferences by delivering lectures in Malaysia, Sri Lanka in various topics. With this brief and a short description of the CV, sir, I request you to enlighten our session with your lecture, sir. Sir, the session is yours.
Thank you for your nice introduction about me. Sometimes I don't give my profile to people because I think that's not very important. What is important is what we transact. So, Professor Nandini Katti and Professor Plessy and other colleagues in the Department of Economics and student friends. In fact, I am very happy to join on the eve of the Gandhi Jayanti. Maybe in our university we are preparing ourselves for celebrating it in a big way. But nowadays webinars are very much on. So I think when I got this invitation, I readily agreed because this appears a little different. So I agreed to that. But normally during this period, we don't go much because we have our own programs. Anyway, thank you for your invitation. And the topic is little which I have preferred because the topic which you have suggested is economic justice from Gandhian perspective. That's something very debatable. I think it is, I think if you start discussing on it, because there are many people who talked about economic justice. So can we put Gandhiji in this line? Because Gandhi was not a theory builder. He was not an economist in the contemporary sense. He was very different. So how are you going to discuss? How are you going to present is a big dilemma in me. So I have chosen. So what Gandhi stood for, what was his ideals and experiments, and what he felt about the economic crisis in India, and that too in the context of the globalization. So because we are passing through globalization, I think globalization is very much welcomed and adapted. I think our lifestyles are changing. So in this context, how we could adapt Gandhian economics? Will it be possible? So that's a very, very difficult question to answer straight away because it needs a lot of experiments. But these experiments are dwindling, not so many. It's going down. So how are you going to justify? That's one. Then to understand Gandhi and the philosophy of his economy, I think what is required. So if you want to understand Gandhiji's philosophy, what is important. So I begin with that, then I will move on to Gandhiji's, globalization and its impact, and how we can relate the present globalization to the context of Gandhi. So because there's a kind of relationship, how it is, then what kind of philosophy or what kind of practices Gandhi did on the lines of economics. So that's a kind of presentation I wish to make today. So the purpose of discussing this, because since you have put this Friday economic, what is it? Friday Economic Forum. So I think Gandhi believed on one aspect. He said, the great awakening in the life of a single individual can change the destiny of the nation and also the destiny of the humankind. So the great awakening is very important for changing an individual as well as the destiny of the humankind. So the awakening on what? Awakening of. So it's not only in economics, it also social, political, in all fields. Now we have passed through the COVID situation and how much we are awakened about the COVID situation, how much awareness and how much knowledge we have to cope up with this situation. I think we have seen. Sometimes we struggle with some of the problem which we faced during this time. So here Gandhi made a kind of experiments on different situations, on different matters, different issues, and different aspects of life. So I think understanding Gandhi would help us, probably will guide us in what direction we should go. But there are certain challenges in understanding Gandhi. And these challenges are in the form of dilemmas, because Gandhi has such a kind of life. So Gandhi, in appearance, he looks very simple. He looks very simple. He looks in the loincloth. I think recently we have celebrated in Tamil Nadu, particularly in Madurai, because I'm staying in Madurai, where Gandhi adapted the loincloth, which symbolizes the simple life. He did it in order to identify himself with the poor masses, and in order to share the issue of poverty. So he wanted to adapt a simple life and simple dress and everything, because the situation was so bad at the time. Poverty was everywhere. People were exploited. And therefore, he wanted to make a change in himself. So he wants to bring the change from himself. So he looks very simple, but his outlook was elegant. He talked about Sarvodaya, welfare of all, not welfare of the Indians, not the welfare of the Gujarati, not the welfare of one particular caste or group. He talked about the welfare of all. So his outlook was so elegant. But the man is so simple in his appearance that his thoughts are something very different. So I think we should understand Gandhi from this perspective. Don't underestimate Gandhi, because Gandhi did so many experiments in his life, and he had a larger exposure on life. So that we should understand. Then he was very tough with issues, but friendly with opponents. I think people are misunderstand or sometimes mistook it. He was tough with issues, but very friendly with opponents. And Gandhi was having tea with the British, people, leaders, talk to them, making jokes and everything. But on issues, he was tough. People got confused with this. So whether Gandhi is genuine or not, whether he really tough with this issue, or because he's very close and friendly with them. So these kinds of doubts were always in the minds of people, even in the minds of scholars also. I think we will also haunted by such kinds of doubts. But if you read his writings and if you have observed, his actions, that will prove he was very tough with issues because he separated issues from people. So that's another important challenge we face in understanding Gandhi. Then the third is he was opposing capitalism, but supported by capitalists. He was opposing capitalism. He was talking against capitalism. But he was around, he was with capitalists and they were supporting his ashramam and he was supported his activities and funds comes from them. And what kind of perception Gandhi had about this capitalist and had about capitalism. And what's the difference between these two, between capitalist and capitalism? How he looked, so that's a matter of great discussion because people again doubt. So I think we should read. Why I say the Gandhi need careful reading. Peripheral reading will not help us to understand because we cannot differentiate between these two because it seems to be one, single. So then he seems to be very religious, but rationalistic in action. Seems to be very religious. He called himself as Sanatani. But his actions were very different. It was very rational. So some of the Sanatani Hindus, they couldn't accept him as Sanatani. The end of Gandhiji, he faced a bullet from such a man. So he was very religious. He uses religious phrases, Ramarajya, he uses. But Ramarajya, he defined differently. His perception about Mahabharata or Ramayana is entirely different from the way we look these epics now. It's very rationalistic in action. I think that needs larger exposure to us. Then he chose very small things to transform bigger changes. He has chosen salt. We a very small thing. I think we have been using it in our day-to-day life. And salt was very much neglected. It was not very important, not expensive. But why Gandhi chose salt? And what's the strategy behind this choosing this? This has to be understood. I think by selecting salt, and he has, he has shaken the empire, British Empire. So this needs a careful consideration and understanding. Then he managed movements and organization while talking about non-violence. Because Gandhi himself said non-violence is for an organization, for non-violence, this organization is the biggest challenge because organizations always needs a kind of hierarchical structure. But non-violence is based on love and equality and things like that. How he, combined these two together. So these are some of the things I think we should clarify to understand. And further, if you want to understand Gandhiji, I think we should know certain things. What was the ideals and goals he stood for? What was his ideal? It was Sarvodaya, then he said Antyodaya, the welfare of the lost man. Is that ideal? This ideal is a utopia, or can we realize these ideals in our life, or can we at least witness the achievement of these ideals? I think it's a big question. Even it was a big question for Gandhi. But for him, these ideals are it's a kind of vision. It helped him to move forward. So it's like a guidepost. It helped him to move forward without any doubt. So that I think we should understand. So while he fixed his ideals, I think though in terms of present day terminology, it's called a long-term goal thing, which he wants to achieve. But he never claimed that he has achieved a part of it. But he was always striving to achieve that. Then what was the philosophy he stood for? His philosophy was fundamentally based on two things: truth and nonviolence. Truth and nonviolence. And there are other things, so many other philosophies he has spoken about. So how much we know? Because without knowing, understanding truth and nonviolence, I think understanding Gandhian economics is also a difficult. I think Gandhi is a very good experiential learner. From his experience, he started learning so many things. And he recorded everything for the sake of future generation. Therefore, careful reading will help us to improve ourselves in this sense. So Gandhi had a wider exposure. So he lived in Britain, then he lived in Africa, and he lived in Asia. And his correspondence with people are so wide, far and wide. People from Japan, people from China, people from America, from all continents. They were having correspondence with him. They met him and talked to him on various issues. So Gandhi was updated with the latest information more than anybody else. So that's very important to look in. Then he did so much of experiments. I tell you, because the experiments are very important for him. He did the experiments when he was in London as a student. For students, I think it will be a very inspiring one. How to lead a simple life. It didn't begin all of a sudden. He did it in London. In the beginning, he was imitating the Western civilization, Western way of life. He hired a room in a hotel. He purchased expensive clothes, and he dressed like an English gentleman. He tried to learn violin, and he went to dance class, and he was trying to change his appearance and lifestyle. But later he found, I think it's not good enough. It's not enough. It's not right. It's not right. And it's not, he was not traveling in the right direction. Immediately he brought change. He hired a room in the slum area and started working and buying food for a cheaper rate. And he did so many things, so many experiments. He reduced his expenses. And this helped him to advocate the philosophy of simple life that he began from student days. So that's the kind of experiments here. Then he made a lot of experiments on food and on various aspects, experiments on non-violent struggle, like that. So the lifestyle is another thing. What kind of lifestyle he had? I think I'm going to talk on it tomorrow to another university students. He started like, in London, he was imitating West, then coming to India, he adapted Gujarati. Then he moved to a simple dress pattern. Then when he went to South Africa, he made a lot of change in it. Then coming back to India, he changed a little bit. Then at Madurai, in my place, he moved to law enforcement. A simple life. So what kind of impact this will bring? He also aware, he wrote all these things to his secretary, Mahatma Desai. So he was aware of the change he made in himself. So he was aware of the lifestyle he was adapting, following his. So he's very conscious in it. Then the period of time is very important. Or what's the period of time? It was a colonial period. People were exploited so much. Poverty was so rampant. And British domination. There was so much of atrocity. There was so much of ignorance among Indians. So much of discriminations. And so many different kinds of rulers in India. British were not the single rulers. I think there were many samastans, and they were also, I mean, using their power on people. So how did Gandhi face all these issues? I think that will give a significant input into our knowledge system. Then the strategies and methods. So that is very unique, very different from others. I think we can go on speaking on this matter, hours together. Then finally, the association with leaders and with people. I think that's very interesting. That's very interesting. You are surrounded by supporters, loyalists, followers, opponents, enemies, bystanders. So different kinds of people, and the rulers, different kinds of people. How Gandhi managed, how Gandhi tried to put his thought and his action while he was facing such a different kinds of people. That's a big challenge in that. So Gandhiji's ideals and experiments are very different. It is varied. It's not a single. So that's the base for my talk. Now I just wants to move to the topic. So as I told you, what is we live in the era of globalization. What is globalization? And in what way it has connected to colonialism, or during the period in which Gandhi was living, and how we take lessons from the colonial period in which Gandhi lived and worked and tried to remove. I think colonialism, in the sense, the evils of the colonialism which brought to us, and how these evils of colonialism was affecting people, how the present globalization affecting our people, and what's the lesson we can learn from it. So that's important. So, globalization, it's not an internationalization. It transcends territory, boundaries, and all that, which as a student of economics, I need not explain all these concepts. So now we are moving towards the global economy. Global economy, which is not limited. It is not limited. And how it affects our economy, we do not know. The economy which got affected in one particular country may affect us. Maybe the oil economy in the Middle East, it very much affects the global economy. The recession happens in America, affects us. The recession happens in Europe, it affects us. If it is our economy, if it is confined to our territory, maybe the effects will be a little different. But now it is very much connected with the global. So whether you contribute or not, it affects us. It affects us badly. So it's a kind of uninvited guest. We have invited the globalization. We opted for it. We moved into it. And now we are facing such a situation. So that's a thing. So what the globalization stands for, it always go for a corporate kind of economy, a big economy, macroeconomy. You know that, macroeconomy. And it based on 4 mantras. What is the efficiency? So what is efficiency? We should be efficient in our performance, in our economic performance, in our economic activity. And if you are not efficient, I think we will not find our place. Sometimes it is very similar to survival of the fittest, but the concept is very different. But here, what efficiency means is the strong could survive, the weak will perish. The weak will perish. So economically strong will survive. So what makes you economically strong? So I think nations are now designing their economic activity based on that. So once nationalization was the order of the day, we want to nationalize everything. Banks, industry, everything should be publicly owned. Now we are making everything is a private and we'll leave it to corporates because in order to compete with other countries, we feel, the government feels that they are not incompetent. So they leave it to the corporates. And what is their nature? Is something that is different. Then we need economy. So it's based on economy, based on global investments and transactions. So that requires huge capital investment. It's very, very important, huge capital. How to mobilize that? How to mobilize that? I think many of the governments are struggling because whatever they collect in the form of tax cannot be invested on economic development because they have to do many other activities. Some of them are very populous activities and they have to spend on it. It's not development. So they have their own struggle. So they simply push this job to the corporates and to economists of different kinds. So I think we'll compare it to the colonial period. I think the rulers, the kings, the monarchs in Europe, they left these economic activities or their trade with the foreign countries. They left these tasks to the companies. This is how the East India Company started. They came to India as a company. Then they become ruler. Now the corporates, they are starting with economic activity and slowly moving, influencing the government policies. So this is something very important things to be looked at. Then productivity. So productivity, the huge industries and based on markets and consumer culture. So huge industries, as yesterday was, one of my friends was talking to me and he was talking about car industry because Ford decided to close its factory in Chennai, wants to move out. And we were discussing why, because I want to buy a car. There was a reason behind it. So this went on to that level. So he says, the support they expected from the government was not adequate now because they have to pay tax and they need concession, especially they ask concession in the supply of power and water. And for producing one car, I think they say they need 1 lakh of liter. They use 1 lakh of liter. So it is a huge, but when Tamil Nadu is facing a lot of water shortage, but giving so much of water for production of car. And because the nature of production is such,
Sir?
Technical issue, I think, for now.
Yes, I guess it's a technical issue. He's there, but I think
Yes,
he's
sir,
lost connectivity. Yeah.
Wait for 5 minutes, rejoin again.
Yes, he may rejoin. He lost connectivity. That's right. Sonali, in the meantime, I've made you the co-host. The media person, she's there. She's.
Yes, from Sonali.
I was searching all the while for Rashi, but
I saw Rashi's name, ma'am.
देखा तो कर
Yeah.
दो उसको co-host. Maybe she's coming now.
I just saw, just a minute, search out.
What happened to Sir now? He has serious neck
Call him.
issues. Yeah.
Call in cinema.
I'll call him and see. He's trying to connect. It's a net issue.
Okay, ma'am.
We'll just wait.
Rashi ma'am is not there. She's not there in the meeting.
Yeah, Rashi is not there. Sonali is there in her post. No problem.
Okay.
Actually, I was recording it. Now, should I stop till Sir comes?
Sir
Yeah, what
joins.
should I do? Yeah, I think I'll stop
pause
till
it,
then.
ma'am.
Yeah.